Really, yes. I'm glad to invite you for the lecture for today. I've
Thank
read
you.
the article you have written in the last 2021 issue of the AA Journal, and an article with the title, "You have stolen, you confessed, the case against reality." And I was really interested in your description of that we are not able to look or to feel or to hear outside our five senses. And that's an issue which we have to emphasize so much more than we do, because the subjectivity of our lives and the way we look at life is well, is rather well, let's say narrow-minded. So this is an issue that needs some emphasis, and I'm glad you, in the consequences of that article, you have made your lecture, and I'm really glad you will share it with us today.
Yes.
For the participants, Adrian told me that he liked to stop once in a while, and then you can chat your questions to me, and I will read them. That's the way we do it. So there is a time you can actually send your questions in, or you can do it just when you have the question. I'll read it afterwards. If there's a lot of questions, maybe you have to make a choice, but let's see how it works. Anyway, Adrian, the deeper story in the chart. Go ahead, I should say.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. And thanks everybody for being there. As you can see, this is the chart for the moment, actually. The horoscope you're looking at is what it looks like above your head in Holland, at least. And I just wanted to point out that you'll see that Pluto in this horoscope is at 27 degrees Capricorn, which is exactly where my Jupiter is. And so this kind of preparing for this talk has kind of made me think a lot deeper about, my conceptions about the horoscope and about reality in general. So it's been a nice process for me. And as you can see from my blurb on the left, what we're going to look at today is how the horoscope is a kind of a personal or subjective map of how we experience both our inner world and our outer world, and that each planet has a role in this. And the first part of the talk, I'll show kind of my idea about how planets filter reality just collectively for human beings. And then in the second part, I'll be looking at new ideas about, which are really convincing, about what so-called reality is, and how we perceive it, and what's the meaning of our perceptions. And the third part of the talk is going to be connected with how, it's a sort of beginning about how to apply some of these ideas, especially the energy that's in planetary patterns and the energy in the four elements, how to apply them to access transformational power, so that we can be more empowered and maybe transform some of the difficult things we're working with. But I'd like to start by sort of making 3 statements, and you can observe how you feel about these statements. And the first statement I'd like you to think about, I want you to think what's happening in your mind, when I say this. And the first statement is that the horoscope in no way reflects actual reality. And what I imagine happens when I say that is that your own judgment system start kicking in. Hey, you've been studying astrology for years, and what's happening here is that you're sort of accessing your belief systems, And if something happens, something is said that contradicts a belief system, a lot of disturbances happen in the brain. Now, the next statement I'd like to say is that astrology is the best tool available for understanding the life and trajectory of the human being. Now, you might like that one, and your mind's going to say, yeah, that sounds like good, because I like astrology. And the third statement is both of these are true. So we're going to investigate this kind of thing, but first we're going to investigate a little bit about our home. And this is our home. This is the solar system, or the heliosphere. And the heliosphere is the energy field of the sun, which is much larger than the solar system and planets, and extends through space. And the interesting thing is, actually, you can see on this drawing that there's the two Voyager spacecrafts that left Earth in the 70s. They've actually, I think in 2012, the first one of them left the heliosphere. And it's actually, the heliosphere is actually a kind of area where the solar system interfaces with the rest of the universe, and it's quite disturbed. And there's all kinds of gravitational waves and lots of things happening. So the Voyager is still sending information back about what's happening outside the sun's heliosphere. But basically, we're all in the heliosphere, and we're in this solar system. We always think of the solar system, I mean, not always perhaps, but we tend to think of the solar system as this kind of idea that the sun's in the center, and all the planets are going around the sun, But actually, the sun, the solar system is traveling through space at 70,000 kilometers an hour in a spiraling course around the Milky Way galaxy. And all the planets are spiraling around the sun. They're never coming back to the same place. So history in itself doesn't repeat itself. It just rhymes. So you're never going to be able to exactly predict what's going to happen, because it's all new, even though there are these rhythmic periods. So what I'd like to show is like a little bit about a kind of view of how we process the energy in the solar system, where the idea, we always think of the sun as our identity. But of course, the sun is a bit more than our identity in a way. It's like, it's the life-giving force in this heliosphere. And it's incredibly powerful. You can't look at the sun for very long, otherwise you'll damage your eyes. And in a sense, the sun as a divine energy vortex is like something we have to be more protected from than like totally absorbed in. So let's have a look at how we're protected. And the planet that's sort of always close to the sun, you can see that in the horoscope, it's never more than, I don't know, 28 degrees is it from the sun, so it's always like close, or in one sign or the next sign, or behind the sun or in front of the sun. It's like it's the first interface that we have in our lives, processing the energy that's streaming out from the sun. So Mercury for us, it's like the way we process experience. It's the first point of contact with the senses to process experience. So in a sense, we kind of our attention is drawn to something in the outside world or in the inside world, and we immediately start kind of to mentally categorize it. And the first thing we're really doing is that we kind of determining its usefulness. We're looking and we're saying, can I use this or can I not use this? And if it's like, you can't use it, you kind of dismiss it. you know, your attention goes to something else, and then you like it, you group it, you're archiving this, you know, all these impulses and these impressions. You start archiving it. It's not actually the archive, but it's the process of archiving impressions from the outer world, and it's the process of recalling from the archive of our memory all these impressions, if we're going to find them useful. So that's like, you know, and we go, of course, we then say Mercury is connected with communication and you know, thinking and thought and that sort of thing. But basically, it's working out what's useful and what's not useful, and it's creating a kind of reality for us. And it's the thing about Mercury. Basically, it wants to work as little as possible. So it creates, it sends out to our brain, you could say our mental impulses from observation, sends to our brain the minimum amount of information to, you know, it's what's useful, the minimum amount of information to orientate ourselves in the world. And film instructors, they know this really well, you know, so they don't build a whole house, as you can see in this picture. They'll, you know, just show the outer structure. But we're doing that all the time without films. We're always, you know, just glancing and jumping to conclusions about what we think we're seeing, and hoping it fits into our worldview, so to speak. So Mercury is the biggest cheat in of all the planets, because it's constructing for human beings. Is constructing this reality that we live in, which is not, as we'll see later, is not the actual reality that's out there. Okay, so after Mercury, we can look at Venus, and Venus is like, after the impressions have come into our brain, the next thing we do is we think, do we like this impression? Do we really not like this impression? Or don't we give a damn about this impression? You know, so it's attraction, aversion, or indifference. This is happening really, really fast. You know, in other words, we're talking about nanoseconds, fractions of a second, where we look at something and immediately judge, do we like it or do we not like it? You know, or can we use it or can we not use it? So it's a kind of attraction force, you know, so for us, depending on where Venus is in the chart, if it's in Taurus, you know, we might be attracted to a nice nature, nice food, you know, but if it's in Gemini, we might be attracted to online courses, you know, and of course, the main function of Venus in attraction is like when we meet people, and the first impression is the impression that Venus has already worked out, it's already got it, and then we can be convinced of other things about this person, but the initial impression happens in less than a second. So it's a completely unconscious process. Yeah, it's just completely unconscious, really. Take a look at this, and when you're looking at the next video, be aware of what you're doing as well.
You're not sharing your sound, Adrian.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for saying. What's happening?
The sound, we don't hear it. We see the video.
Okay.
We don't hear anything. So I think you have to activate your sound also for sharing.
Yeah. Okay. Just a minute. It's not so important, the sound, but. Yeah, you're quite right. I probably wouldn't hear it. Only I would hear it. Okay, can you hear this then? Just let me know if you can or cannot. So the question is
Yes.
The sound is not very clear.
It doesn't matter. Okay, I'll stop it and I'll explain what's happening. So this guy's using this guy's using Tinder, and what he's doing is he's looking at the different women that's coming up on the screen. He kindly shared this on YouTube, and he's quickly deciding, does he like them or doesn't he like them? And so the point of this is for you guys listening to this, is to see how quick he's making the judgment about a person, but also to look at what's happening in your own judgment system. So I'll carry on. Just interrupt me if there's a problem. Let's get into the video. Okay, so so this guy is kind of made these fast judgments, and he's not the only one doing it. I don't know how many million people are using Tinder, but Tinder is an app that has understood just how quickly humans make judgments about people, and does so very successfully. And you'll find that many successful apps and things like that, and advertising bureaus, etc., they know exactly what the way we judge things and manipulate us accordingly. So let's have a look at the moon, which perhaps it should have come before Mercury, because the moon is like the receptive antenna, parabolic antenna, really picking up and filtering every impression down onto the earth, in a sense. And what the moon does is, so think about this a little bit. What the moon does, it's really looking for a situation where it can feel secure. So it builds up a life, it builds up a home, it builds up habits, and rhythms which constantly reassure the person about change. This is the kind of situation with the moon. You know, really, we just want to be lying on the breast, and we try and create that situation in our lives. And our success or not success in doing it is based on the aspects of the moon. So, for example, if the moon is opposite Uranus, Pluto, there's no breast. You know, the person probably may have been in an incubator or something. So the moon's going to show like how you're desperately searching for a safe place to be, and it also, the important thing about the moon is that as you get all these impressions coming in, and you judge them, or you like them or you don't like them, etc. You don't want to be keep doing it. You learn to drive a car and to change the gear and to pull the brakes and steer the wheels. But you don't want to keep thinking, oh, now I must push the brake, or now I must change gear. As soon as you can get away with it, you're going to store this as a kind of muscle memory in your body. You know, so the moon becomes what we call habits and stuff like that. But it's like minimizing the amount of time you have to use on any particular activity by committing it to memory and instinct. You know, so it becomes an instinctive act. So it's very much connected with unconscious behavior.
unconscious, unconscious, the unconscious in general, in a way. Okay, so let's have a look at Mars. So as soon as you perceive something with Mercury and start sort of labeling it and categorizing it and sticking it in the archive, and you've kind of judged whether you want it or not with Venus, and you kind of created, it's all gone in the storage system with the moon. Now, if you like something, this is like after Venus, if you something you like, you immediately say, well, I'm going to get that. So this is what Mars is about. It's like how to go and get what you want, or how to flee from what you don't want. So a nice, tasty deer might have been like what you run towards if you were a primitive man, and the saber-toothed tiger is what you'd be running away from. And Mars is the mobilization of muscle, power, energy to get or get away from what you want. So it's connected really with fight, flight, or freeze. You want to get the object of your desire, or it's like how you combat a threat, and it's all to do with the kind of adrenaline, speed, and force. So Mars in our horoscopes is kind of it shows our ability to get what we want, and how we mobilize what we get, what we want. So, for example, I have Mars in Gemini, so I'm reading newspapers, and generally it's in the 9th house, so I'm generally sort of reading a whole lot of stuff to get a better understanding of the world, and that's my competitive advantage, you could say, in the world. And somebody like John McEnroe, I don't know how many people can remember John McEnroe, but I think in the 70s, he had these really famous Wimbledon finals with Bjorn Borg from Sweden. But if anybody remembers John McEnroe, they'll remember that he had some. What one really remembers, apart from the fact he was a fantastic tennis player, what one really remembers is that he couldn't control his temper, and you can sort of see that in the horoscope. He's probably a nice guy. He says, this is a quote from him. He says, "I'm not a monster. I'm not all bad. Maybe 10%. I think I'm 90% good." And I think he's 90% good too. You can sort of see he's got Libra rising and Venus in Pisces, exalted in the 5th house. He's probably quite a sweet guy. In fact, he's got 5 kids and 3 daughters. And he says the best thing about having 5 kids is that there's always somebody who says they love you, which is great, because, so many people hated him. And thought he was incredibly rude, which he was, because he couldn't control his temper. And you can see this in this fixed cross in his horoscope, where he's got Mars in Gemini, a square Mercury, so he's got this tremendous dexterity. Mars opposite Jupiter. He's very, very competitive, extremely competitive. And then it's kind of square Pluto, so he's got Mercury, Pluto, Mars. Mercury, Pluto, Mars in this kind of aspect. It almost always gives bad language. Anyway, it gives a terrible, terrible inner dialogue and a terrible outer dialogue. And I think the whole thing with Jupiter as well, whether it's just or not just, if you have a bad line call, when you're playing tennis, Mars opposite Jupiter, he's going to get really, really angry. Yeah, even I'm thinking Mercury is on between Aquarius and Pisces. It's like a bad line call. So now we're going to see a bad line call. Don't worry about the sound. There is sound on this, but the important thing is just to watch his body language. So here goes. He's just got a line called out. He doesn't like it, right? Excuse me. So there you go. I hope you got that. He wasn't happy. You know, he couldn't control himself. And you get that with these Pluto influences on the personal planets. You know, it starts getting out of control. You can see how he started losing control there. And his temper took over. And that's what he's remembered for, really. Yeah, I think he's cracked it now. He's much older and he doesn't really make these mistakes, as far as I know. Okay, so going on to the next planet, which is Jupiter. This talks really about Jupiter because you know, I'm asking you to look at to kind of follow my line of reasoning, and you know, people I've been studying, and your ability to, well, yeah, you can say your ability to do so is very much reflected by Jupiter in the horoscope. So Jupiter is the planet that most disguises meaning in the horoscope. So notice how your Jupiter kicked in there, you know, because you think, oh, that's the opposite of that. Jupiter is wisdom. But the trouble with Jupiter is that it's after all these impressions and the actions Mars to get what we want, we start forming a body of opinions or convictions. And this body of opinion and conviction is a kind of filter which prevents us from expanding our understanding. Not everybody, but it prevents many people when they get fixated on a particular idea. You know, this becomes their way of understanding the world. I mean, there's many thousands, millions perhaps of people who think that Hillary Clinton was part of a pedophile ring, which was run from a pizza house in Washington, and was international. And, you know, and many people subscribe to that belief. In fact, one guy, he came with his rifle to the pizza house to kind of expose this pedophile ring. You know, and unfortunately got arrested because there was no basement in the pizza house. But, you know, there are simply a lot of belief systems out there which really constrict views of reality. But any opinion constricts reality. So if we look at Jupiter, is basically connected with this formation of belief systems and filtering the impressions we get in discussing with people. We filter it through our beliefs, so it doesn't gain some extra idea or some different belief. When it hits our belief system, it gets kind of filtered out because we know that it's, you know, we've worked out something for ourselves, so we know that's wrong. So we start gravitating towards groups of people who share our beliefs. And as we gravitate towards these groups of people, our beliefs get more confirmed, and we begin to define our own identity within that group. And you can sort of see this with Richard Dawkins, I think. You know, now Richard Dawkins he was a professor of science, I think, at Oxford University. He wrote this book, The God Fallacy or something. You know, he's an atheist, so he really is intellectually opposed to the ignorance that springs forth from religious belief. And what he said is that religion is about turning untested belief, he's a scientist, right, into unshakable truth through the power of institutions and the passage of time. Now that's right. I mean, that is a from certainly from his point of view anyway. It's a really good argument. You know, that seems to be the situation if you consider the history of the Catholic Church, for example. So he's convinced about that. But if you look at his horoscope, you'll see that he's born in 1941. This was this grand conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus. And Jupiter, if you think of Jupiter as the filter through which you start forming beliefs, Jupiter and Saturn is like in Taurus. We're talking about really fixed beliefs here. Jupiter and Saturn, I should just mention this is solar chart. I don't know the birth time, so it doesn't really matter. So Jupiter and Saturn is in a way, it's his kind of church, or it's the kind of the power of the unshakable truth through the power of institutions. Jupiter, Saturn in Taurus. But the fact that it's conjoining Uranus is that, well, you know, this is science. What science has got something different to say, you know. So he's revolutionizing theoretically the you know, or overthrowing belief systems that he considers to be dogmatic and you know, and old-fashioned. Well, that's the point, I think, of the Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus conjunction. Is the kind of renewal of belief systems. But in doing so, he's created his own orthodoxy. You see, so he's created this orthodoxy of science, and he, you know, that's. And so it's become a mission for him to expose any kind of woolly thinking. And so he's actually, there's a whole series of YouTube videos where he's interviewed the spiritualists, religious people, you know, and anybody who's got kind of a flaky belief. And you can actually see that his urge to do that in the horoscope is shown by this Venus-Neptune opposition, and possibly the moon in Pisces. The moon is also in Pisces, so it's, you know, he's definitely, you know, he's got this kind of, I don't know what it is, a sort of split off spiritual side. So he goes interviewing these spiritual people, exposing them, you know, for their false beliefs, you could say. So there's something in him, you know, that can't quite be reconciled to the his own view, and then he projects it onto this interview system that, you know, where he interviewed people, and he interviewed this guy Neil Spencer, who's an astrologer, and Neil Spencer he wrote the sun sign column for The Observer, and this really pissed off Richard Dawkins, because that was his newspaper, and there was astrology in the Sunday newspaper, The Observer. So he interviews Neil Spencer here, and if you can't hear it, there's subtitles sort of thing. That will help you along. That's Neil Spencer. Good point. So you see, he's trying to trick him here, you know, like saying, what's the energy, you know, what's the energy? Is there a radiation from people to the cosmos? Impossible, right? And, you know, but Neil Spencer, he actually negotiates this really well, navigates this whole process quite well, actually. But I mean, Richard Dawkins is pretending to be kind of scientific, you know, but he proposed a really silly experiment. If you can watch the video, it's Neil Spencer, Richard Dawkins, YouTube. Yeah, a very unscientific kind of way he thought could prove astrology. You know, it's very, very difficult to prove astrology. Okay, so let's have a look at Saturn. Yes. So Saturn, in the sense, it represents the boundaries, the visible boundaries of the solar system, you know, and for us, we see it as the well, I could describe it here at least as the inescapable karmic conditions for our birth. If you don't like karma, you know, just the inescapable, it's like what are the prevailing conditions in society, what is possible and what is not in society, you know, so you're limited by that, and you're also, what Saturn, because Saturn tends to kind of evoke situations where unless you really work hard at things, you're going to fail at them. You build this database of experience, and you're always consulting that. You know, so you sort of say, "Oh, I tried this last time; it didn't work, so I can't do it now." You know, so in the sense, it's a limitation. We have convictions about, you know, about our personal limitations, which are not necessarily true, but they certainly seem true based on our past experiences. So Jupiter is kind of the planet that kind of gives us a vision and a hope of what we can achieve. We wake up in the morning and we look and think, oh, I'm going to do this. That's Jupiter. You know, the Saturn says, but wait a minute, last time you did this, it didn't work out, so to speak. So they work together in a sense to build up a body of experience in our life. I have an interesting example of Saturn. It's not a very scientific example, yeah, Daniel Craig, James Bond, the best. As you can see, he's born with Scorpio rising. Mars, I always like Mars as the ruler of Scorpio, but take your pick. And Mars is in Aries, you know, so this is a real man, ascendant ruler, Mars in Aries. He's a real man, you know, and he's like everybody's total masculine man. And but Mars and Saturn are like, you know, in the minutes where he's born, Mars and Saturn conjoin. So this is a person who, you know, is kind of struggling with masculinity. And you could, I mean, obviously for him, when anyone sees Daniel Craig, they see James Bond, right? So, you know, but for him, he doesn't see James Bond. He sees a guy who has to go and train for 6 months to get muscles, and then he can lose the muscles again, you know, and then he has to do it 2 years later. So, you know, he's bodybuilding and sort of building up this sort of masculine identity, which is just a kind of entertainment thing. So you've got Mars and Saturn is in the 5th, conjoining the 6th house, you know, it's all hard work, entertaining. And it kind of, it's unexpected, but it kind of makes this semi-square pattern to the Jupiter Neptune. So we got the kind of glamour and film star kind of thing, or channeling into this Mars Saturn. And it puts him in these terrible situations, you know, in the, as James Bond. And I've got a little situation which nobody actually would like to be in. And you might recall this from Casino Royale, where he's tied to a chair, and unfortunately his manhood is threatened by this very nasty character. Yeah, so he points out that if he continues, he's going to lose his manhood. And that's the kind of thing that can happen if you have a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aries, I suppose. But fortunately, don't worry anybody, it's in the 5th house. And as such, it's just entertainment. But, you know, we all, I don't know if we enjoyed that, but there we are. That was, if you've seen Casino Royale, that was the torture scene where he was, you know, heavy object struck his testicles. Yeah, that's Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 5th, isn't it? Yeah, it's okay. The guy was shot, so James Bond escaped from this terrible situation. No problem.
But he actually died in the end.
Oh, James.
Yes, the
Ah,
last movie.
tell everybody.
Sorry for those who didn't watch it.
Yeah,
Maybe he'll
I'm
come
afraid
resurrected.
it's true. The James Bond, what can you say, is no longer with us, which I think is very, very bad for Britain, generally speaking, not good at all. It's a bad sign. Who's going to save us now, really, basically, from international criminals?
We are the ones to save ourselves.
Oh, okay, right. We'll do that. And looking at the outer planets a little bit, the outer planets represent factors that are more in the collective cycle of things, and so they're pretty much out of our control in many ways. And so Uranus can sort of represent they're all very disorienting planets, the outer planets. Uranus kind of reflects the freedom and the fear of freedom. And Neptune would, the dissolution of what you're trying to keep hold of, and Pluto, the utter destruction of what has outlived its use, you could say. So these are never easy in any kind of aspect to personal planets, but they certainly make people interesting and different. And at the same time, if you can tune into these planets, there's this kind of definitely a sense of being connected to a new power source, a sort of more divine power source, which can transform your consciousness and your mind. Looking at, I found a nice little example of this in J.K. Rowling's horoscope, who wrote all the Harry Potter series. And it's not an easy horoscope, this one. You can see that, if you've got Aquarius rising, if you like, I would look at Saturn and Uranus as co-rulers of Aquarius. They're opposed to each other, and Uranus is on Pluto, Saturn's opposition Pluto. So she says that, rock bottom became the solid foundation for my life. And she really means that, Saturn in Pisces, intercepted, obviously Uranus, Pluto intercepted. It's like, it's not a happy story, but you can sort of see that in a way she channeled it through Jupiter, which is at the center of the T-square. And she wrote, she kind of communicated, and Jupiter's trying Mars, it's sort of quite nice. So that was like the happy way she channeled the terribly difficult energies involved in this T-square. But the interesting thing about this horoscope, I think, is that she she projected all this evil into a completely different world, a sort of world, a dark shadow world, which we muggles, humans, were totally excluded from. So it's like this intercepted nature of the Saturn, Uranus, Pluto. It's like contained, but separate. Nobody can get into this world. She only lets her readers in. They have to get to station 9 3/4 at Liverpool Street or something, onto to get to the Hogwarts, and there they learn about magic. So and then she, everybody that was like born in this period, they're kind of seeing this sort of films, reading the books. This is when Jupiter is in, Uranus is in Pisces and Aquarius, and Neptune's in Aquarius. Everybody's frightened out of their brains. Poor old Harry. And that was the world she conjured up, which affected hundreds of millions of people. So the collective influence, she kind of channeled that collective influence really, really well. Right? Okay. So, I'm just wondering about time now. If any questions have come in right now, we can take them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, yeah.
Very quickly, in that chart that you had after Pluto, was that Charon, which you have included in the picture?
Oh, you mean the actual picture? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There. Yeah. It's quite nice.
You put
Isn't it?
Charon there.
Yeah. But I guess you have to consider it as a joint planet, really, to Pluto and Chiron. You can even see the moons of Mars, actually, Phobos and Venus. Yeah. Yes, but I have no interpretation for that.
Okay. I did have two questions which I submitted to Peter, but I don't know if you, Peter, you want to do that later in the discussion or now?
Now's a good time for questions, actually.
Okay. Peter, can you remind me?
Yeah, you could go ahead. So, yeah, there are long questions, so maybe you can. How about the consideration of where the planet is in its own orbital journey around the sun, and also the planet's declinations, position, whether it's south or north?
Yeah.
Even ecliptic.
No, yeah, I think it's really important, the declinations of the planets, but I don't work much with declinations, and also it's not so important for this talk, because we're kind of looking at the way the planets filter reality, really. They would do so whatever declination they have, but it's just not my area of expertise, declinations. That's the question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have other question, Mariam?
Yeah,
so
I'll
maybe
say
you
that
can
quickly.
you can ask the question by yourself. So
Yeah, something you mentioned about Jupiter is a planet that most disguises the reality, let's say, or constricts our views of reality.
Mm.
So my question is, believing certain realities or ideas, that forms a judgment, right? And that becomes like part of who we think that we are, our ego personality. Yeah, but how about discernment versus judgment? Because we can't be okay to everything, because that could be it could be threatening to your life. In fact, if you're faced by a bear or a wolf or whatever, and you don't have, you don't know what to do. I mean, you need discernment.
But that wouldn't be a Jupiter thing. If you're faced by a bear or a thing, that would be Mercury seeing it, Venus deciding whether you wanted to play with it or not, and Mars saying, okay, better run, and then, then you go home and you say to everybody, listen, there's a bear out there and bears are dangerous, so don't go out there. That would be a kind of Jupiter thing.
Okay. I was just looking at, is it that balance between Jupiter and Saturn, which is seeing the beliefs and then discerning, as you described, Saturn through that filter. Okay, what has happened in the past? Do I really want to do that or believe that or whatever? So I was relating it more to
writing down. You got your beliefs, then you found that bears are dangerous, and you write them down in a book and you pass your book on to your children, and that kind of established knowledge would be like what Saturn's done to Jupiter, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Well, that was like what I thought is the way we're looking at the world through the planets, because I'm into astrology. But here's another view. So this is going to really stretch belief systems now. So, but it's so convincing, and it's really, really important. And the great thing about this is that, well, I've never studied science. I like reading about it, quantum physics and stuff like that. You know, I'm not a great my wife's a psychologist. It's kind of a little bit come that way. I'm just an astrologer basically, but I am a Buddhist, you know, and so I've studied a lot of Buddhism. And in fact, this little thing, this calligraphy here actually says astrology, and it was done by my Buddhist teacher. So you know, the thing about what we're going to look at now is that it's so it harmonizes so perfectly with the Buddhist view of how we see reality. And the Buddhist view is basically that all suffering stems from an illusory sense of self, and that there is no solid self, and you know, there's just consciousness, and that the world the world we see it out there, it's just like an ornament of consciousness. It's just what's conjured up, like in a dream. And this is like, but you know, scientists are just amazing, and they, you know, this is what we're looking at since Einstein. You know, is a kind of whole new view of what the outer world is like, and what matter is, etc. And the first thing that really shook up the scientific world after Einstein was this idea of it was called the double slit experiment. And just follow this me a little bit with this. I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but the idea was that when you fired a particle through two slits, sometimes they behave like waves, which is like energy, and sometimes they behave like atoms, which is like matter. But then they discovered that, well, they couldn't figure it out because there was sort of interference on this measuring plate beyond the double slit. And so they kind of put a detector to see, okay, which slit was it going through, the atom, you know. And the fact was that if it's waves, it can go through both slits at the same time, but if it's an atom, it can only go through one slit. But when they observed it through this detector, then it was always a particle or an atom. It didn't behave like a wave. When they didn't observe it, it behaved like a wave, and they've never worked out why. And in our lives, and if you want to kind of look at it like this, well, what seems to be the obvious conclusion is that when you observe an experiment, it affects the experiment. You know, when you observe reality, it affects reality. And this is really, really important. The other thing I suppose you could say is that matter and energy are interconnected and interchangeable. But this act of observation is what we're doing all the time. See, we think, or we tend to think, that the world's out there, and we happen across it, and we see what's going on with our eyes, and hear what's going on in the ears, and smell what's going on, taste, you know, the apple. You know, so we happen upon the world, and we see the world exactly as it is, well, as close as we can with the five senses we've got, and you know, and that becomes our inner representation, or our representation of the world. It's pretty good. It works. It really works. So it seems logical, but it's not what's happening. You could sort of say it's like, you could, as a parallel, you could say, like, for hundreds of years, people thought that the Earth was flat, and that's because it looks flat. You mean, basically, anybody who doesn't have a fast means of transport or great observation, good eyesight, maybe, they're going to say, well, it was flat, it's obvious. And then they thought, well, everything went around the you know, the Earth was stationary, which is like, it feels stationary. Right? So that seems logical. So it's easy for our senses to make something seem logical when it isn't. So this guy, Donald Hoffman, he's come up with this theory, and it's really good. And that's where I stole the idea case against reality from my article. And he says that his book is called Why Evolution Hid the Truth from Our Eyes. And there's a YouTube video of a TED talk he did, which is great, only 20 minutes. I put the link at the end of this, by the way, and if you wish to have a PDF of this talk, you need to go to my website, which is also at the end of the talk, and then just write an email, I'll send you the PDF. So this is the question that he said, Donald Hoffman. He said, does our experience of the outer world via our senses actually give us a truthful representation of what we experience? In other words, does an apple look like an apple when we are not looking at it? So the thing is, right up to Einstein, right up to Crick with the DNA in 1953, and discovery of DNA, and basically right up to almost the end of the 20th century. Everybody, the scientific world, pretty much said, look, we've evolved to fine-tune our senses, our vision and hearing, etc., to make the most accurate representation of the world out there that's possible. Evolutionary, Darwinian idea of evolutionary development, survival of the fittest, etc., comes because we've developed such fantastic, accurate representation of reality. That we just, we see the world pretty much exactly as it is. Now, most people think that's true. I mean, and scientists, like scientists up till the end of last century, would say that's obvious. It's called veridical reality. It's like, obviously, when we see an apple, it's there, and we see it exactly as it is. It's reddish and round, and it's got this taste and smell, and it's like a meter away. And even if we look away, it's going to be there. And listen, if you don't think it's there, ask my wife. She can see the apple. So everybody else can see the apple. So look, the apple's definitely there. Even if I'm not looking away, just ask. But his point is that every human has the same kind of way of representing what their senses are delivering. That's why we're humans. Our eyes are the same, so we're going to make the same kind of picture. Might make a few variations of what we see, but basically we all agree. There's a consensus about what reality is like. So this is like his way of saying it. So not just coming from me. And there's subtitles on this. So if you don't hear it. Oh, sorry. He's describing now the interface of what you're looking at now, what everybody here on this talk is looking at. You're looking at a computer screen, and he's using the computer screen as a metaphor for reality. So it's not that the computer is reality; it's just a metaphor of. So here it goes. In fact, it's there to hide that reality. You don't want to know about the software. If you had to deal with that, you could never write a text file or edit your photo. So the idea is that evolution has given us an interface that hides reality and guides our behavior. Space and time, as you perceive them right now, are your desktop. Physical objects are simply icons in that desktop. Now that is a pretty heavy claim. That's like what he's saying is that what you're seeing is nothing like reality. That what we've evolved to do, we've evolved to via our senses to pick out the signals that are most useful, not how it actually looks, but what's useful to survive. And it's not even remotely how things are. But he's not saying that it's like all made up in our heads. He's saying there is a reality out there, which is exactly what Buddhism says. There is a reality out there. It's just not what you think. What you think it is a complete illusion. That's what he says. So to get a better idea of this, I'm going on and on. Oh, that's an hour. We still got a little bit of time. Yeah. So to get a better idea of this, here's a kind of, let's discuss a little bit what the eye does. The eye is like 130 megapixel camera, you know, and it picks up a hell of a lot of signals. Now, it's never going to send all those signals to the brain. Already in the eye, we have these rods and cones that actually kind of discard a lot of information about what we're seeing. And then it's kind of compressed already in the eye and then sent to the brain's cortex. And the brain's cortex is a third of the size of the brain. It's there's billions and trillions of synapses, billions of neurons. So you know, what's it doing? I mean, if it's like a camera, if it's like the way we're looking at stuff through an iPhone camera, you know, what's all this about? You know, you see a camera or even a computer screen is actually showing all of reality. Well, all of what it's represented is showing everything, but the eye is not doing that. In actual fact, if you hold your thumb out like this, your thumbnail is the amount of, you know, at a distance, your thumbnail is the amount of visual, precise visual representation that you're sending to the brain. You think you may be seeing everything around you, right? But you're not, you're making up everything around you. And the only thing that you're really concentrating out is like something the size of your thumbnail. But all these billions of neurons and trillions of synapses are as you move your eyes, they're already creating all the different things you're seeing, you know. So the visual system is in real time creating your representation of the outer world. That's what the cortex is doing. So you're not like getting films in. You're creating the you know, you're creating a representation of what you're seeing, and that representation is what you need to know. It's not all there is. It's what you need to know to get by. Now, there's something called evolutionary game theory, and this guy Donald Hoffman and teams of people, and it's been replicated all over the world. They've made this kind of game theory, you know, where they put different kinds of parameters into the computer, and they sort of test, is seeing reality exactly as it is, like veridical vision, is seeing reality as it is a superior method for evolution, or is seeing what's useful superior? And every time it's just what's useful that is the dominant evolutionary force. So you know, basically science and scientists today accept what Donald Hoffman's saying, that space-time is something that we just create for our convenience as a kind of way of navigating, and it's the but actually it's kind of symbols. Now I'm gonna have a break, I think, and I can take any questions you've got, and then we can have a break. A cup of tea. I'm not sure if you're drinking tea in Holland.
Yes, we do.
Oh no, that's not tea. Tea has to have milk in it. Okay, that's
I think
another.
there is a question, Adrian.
Yeah.
A raised hand.
Yeah.
Mary.
Adrian, I was wondering about people who have hallucinations, like schizophrenics, right?
Yeah.
They see a very different reality.
Yeah.
And is that kind of confirmation that maybe a reality
it's actually a confirmation.
not?
And it reminds me of, it's funny you should say that, it reminds me of the story. I was, periodically I'm up in Scotland and I'm doing this meditation in a Tibetan place called Sami Ling. It's great. And I was up there a couple of years ago, and there was a woman that also was there. She looked a bit disheveled, you know, and she didn't seem very good. But anyway, I fell asleep. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning, the fire alarm rang, and everybody had to get up. It was freezing cold, it was November, and leave the building. But this woman, there, she was schizophrenic, and she was still up there, and I was trying to get her out, you know, but she saw some people out outside the building, you know, come on out there, I can see you, you know, and she really did see these people. They weren't there, but she saw them, you know, and I mean, the thing about that is, of course, your mind, you have to, you can't start diverging from the generally accepted version of reality, the consensus view. Then it kind of gets abnormal. But the fact that she could build this reality shows that we build our own reality in the brain. And we do that, of course, when we sleep and make dreams, and you know, we're not using our senses at all. It's all happening through a visualization sense, or the mind sense, which is like a sixth sense. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it was a funny experience. The police had to come and pick her up. Yeah, and there's no way you could convince her of anything. Okay, I'll be back in quarter of an hour, if that's okay with everybody else.
Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So it's like nearly 25 past. So at 22:03, I'll be back.
Yep. Okay, time for a tea break or something else.
Yes.
Thank
Tea
you.
with
Adrian.
milk.
Yes. Yeah. I can. Yeah. Maybe I'll make a YouTube video to show how you do that. All right. See you.
Go for that.
Okay. So so we were looking about how the how we process with the eye information and create a sort of internal picture. And there's lots of scientific experiments that prove we actually create a picture. You know, we're not actually seeing what's out there. We're actually recreating our version of what we see. And we do that with ears as well, you know. So when we hear something, it actually vibrates some small bone in our ear, and that vibration is like made into music and sound, and which we like and don't like, you know. And so that's what's going on with this, you know, our brains, which are really, really big and active. This is a kind of picture I made, which kind of tries to show what we do with our senses, and you can think of you know, this on the right is our consciousness, and on the left is the object of our consciousness, and we're accessing the object of our consciousness with these 5 senses: taste, smell, touch, hearing, and vision. Now, the object of consciousness we think is like what we're seeing or hearing, but the idea, according to evolutionary psychology and Donald Hoffman and Buddhism, is that these are, I've just made a kind of computer picture of zeros and ones, but you know, this outer world, which is there, it's just not like what we make it. So we might be looking at, seeing this on the left and creating this apple, you know, which has weight, and it seems to be round, and it's got a nice smell, and it's definitely good to eat. The thing that we're saying to ourselves here is that this is nice, sweet, good to eat, and it's going to be okay, healthy. It's good for my fitness. It's going to help me survive. So we create that, and we create it magnificently. And that process of creation is something that's been honed over millions of years through evolutionary development. The thing is about this world on the left, what we're seeing, what we think, what we're interacting with, it's like if we did see it, let's suppose we actually saw this object of consciousness clearly as it was, we wouldn't be able to handle it. It's a bit like that metaphor that Donald Hoffman was using about the computer screen. If you got a Word document icon on your desktop, and to work with it, you had to understand all the code that went into the computer. You'd never get anything done. It's much easier to represent that your file, which is not like that icon on the desktop, by the icon on the desktop. You don't want to do anything stupid with it, like putting it in the rubbish bin or anything like that. You're going to be careful about that icon and how you treat it and stuff. Well, that's a bit like the metaphor of the world. But if we saw the world as it was, we would be totally overwhelmed. And this reminds me of, in the Bhagavad Ghita, which was like this Hindu holy book written 2,500 years ago. The story one of the stories in the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna, who is a god, is driving a chariot. They're going to war, and Arjuna, his disciple, it says, "Look, Krishna, can't you show me how what you're really like? I know you're God and all that." So he says, "Make thyself visible, Lord of all the prayers." And Krishna says, "No, you don't want to see that. That's not the way we should be going." But Krishna begs to see Krishna in his full form, and Krishna reveals himself suddenly within the skies, sunbursts of 1,000 suns. And there's about 2 pages in the Bhagavad Gita describing this vision of God. And Krishna's like thinking, well, he can't stand it. He says to Krishna, Arjuna says to Krishna, "For pity's sake, thine earthly shape, which earthly eyes may bear, be merciful and show the visage that I know." So he's begging to see, just to see the normal version of reality, if you like. And I think basically that is the situation, like in terms of, what it's like. I think it's good, we need to kind of find out more about what reality is, but, it's difficult. And I think even Jesus was saying that when he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." There has to be some kind of intermediary influence guiding a soul to be able to experience the potency of pure energy, if you like. And that's true in the Buddhist tradition, where I don't think they ever kind of consider that you can reach enlightenment alone, but there's always a teacher, and there's always a lineage, and there's always a kind of transmission of knowledge and information, so that people can gradually approach, and handle an experience of reality when they see it. Okay, so that's like the case against reality, or a presentation of a new view of reality, and how to transpose that onto, like, so what can you use astrology for? How can you help people navigate their lives with bearing in mind something about this, what the filters that they're using to both protect and navigate themselves through life. And I think the key to this is first of all, when you have a client, you have to understand that the horoscope is just a map, and the map is nothing like the person. This, for example, is a map of Copenhagen underground system. It's a nice map, but it is absolutely nothing like Copenhagen. But on the other hand, you can't get around Copenhagen without this map, not on the underground. So it's really, really useful. And the horoscope is really, really useful for helping people navigate. But, they know what Copenhagen looks like. You don't. You just got the map. So when you're dealing with a client, you've got this kind of horoscope between you, you could sort of say. And the person, it's nice for the person to know that there's something in the moon and stars that can tell them about it expands their consciousness. That's the great thing about astrology. It sort of makes you think, wow, there's much more to perception in the world and my life than I thought. But it's still just a map, right? So now you can go about this, the consultation process in several different ways. Now, and I'd just like to kind of explore this kind of idea about unity and duality. So let's start with, for example, matter and energy. Is there matter or is there energy? Well, there's tremendous amount of energy locked up in matter. And when you explode a nuclear bomb, for example, then matter is transformed into energy. So there's a transformative experience, and there's a kind of, they seem totally opposite, but within matter is energy, and within energy is matter. And if you sort of take the whole idea of subject and object, you're the subject, consciousness, and you've got the object of your consciousness. It seems, like when you're completely convinced about the separateness of the object, then actually your navigation system isn't working as well as it could be. Maybe I can explain that better with the body and mind idea. So we kind of see, our bodies, and we kind of think of our minds as being separate from our bodies. This is very Western, like in places like Tibet and that, indigenous societies, they're much, much more in tune with their body. But in the West, we're very rational, and we're always sort of, everything's kind of around the head. We're kind of often pretty much disconnected from the body. But there's kind of meditation systems where, or body scan, if you like. You can, when you scan your body, you get more focused or more grounded in your body, and that's a kind of good thing. And if you take that to its ultimate, when you're meditating, for example, and you feel your body, the goal, if you want to go, the goal is that the actual feeling of the body, you're feeling like your big toe, your shoulders or whatever, the feeling when there's a kind of, it becomes not like when you say, I must feel my shoulders, and you sort of say, I'm going to feel my shoulders now. There's this kind of merging, you can approach a kind of point where the mind rests on the body and the body sensation on the mind. And there's just a unity of experience, at which point you don't know really what's the mind and what's the body. So there's this kind of union. And that's the idea of unity and duality, that subject and object, body and mind, matter and energy are actually a unity, not a polarity. And that there are ways of getting into that experience. And when you are in that experience, you have access to transformative energy. You know, it's like really, really the answer, and it transforms everything. So between the astrologer and the client, what doesn't work, or you know, what one tends to do, you know, you could get this idea of a monologue. I had this. We had some astrology group, which you know, there's one of the astrologers, quite a well-known astrologer, who you know, we exchanged consultations, and but his consultation was it was a monologue, you know, and actually I wasn't supposed to interrupt at all, you know. So, and it was in the afternoon. I started falling asleep, you know, because I get a bit sleepy in the afternoon, and the monologue, you see, when you make the monologue, when you just talk to the person, talk to or at the person, the separation is at its most complete, you know, most extreme. You know, so the more you tell the client something, the more barriers you're creating between the connection. So to get around that, yeah, what needs to happen is that there needs to be a merging or a meeting or an interpersonal space between the astrologer and the client where transformation can take place. That means that and the way to do that basically is to focus on asking questions rather than giving judgments. So an example could be, this is an example, I suppose. Yeah, an example could be, you know, you're describing a Venus-Saturn square, and then you'd sort of say, well, you could sort of say, I guess, you know, in relationships, you tend to feel a bit inhibited in relationships, and you know, and you might even feel that relationships restrict you a bit. So that would be kind of a monologue kind of idea, you know, where you placed an interpretation, and the person probably thinks, yeah, that sounds okay, you know. But there would be another way of doing that. You could sort of say, and actually the best way of doing it is you're looking precisely at the horoscope to see where exactly this is going on. So let's say Venus was in the 6th house, square Saturn. Then, you know, the blockage in relationship would be at work, probably. It'll be in their personal life too, but you know, the actual concrete experiences will be easy to relate to. So you could sort of say, do you experience that colleagues are reserved, and you know, you don't have a very warm relationship with your colleagues at work? Now you're immediately engaging the client. The client then starts searching the database of their experiences, and then they'll say, oh yeah, you know, Fred at work is just so unfriendly, you know, and you've got to kind of weigh in. You've got to weigh in, and I've written a book about this called Astrology, Transformation and Empowerment, you know, there's a questioning technique which will then evoke the energy. What you want to get to is the energy. That's this Venus Saturn has nothing to do with the colleague Fred. It's nothing to do with their partner. It's to do with an energy that's there at their birth. And that energy is a core energy. It's incredibly powerful. And that's where you want to get in this astrology client division. You want to be meeting them in the personal space, in that energy field, which is connected with whatever aspect you're dealing with. So the more distance in your interpretation, the more separation, the less connection. The more merging, the greater the transformation. The greater the subjective focus, your own focus on what you do, the weaker the experience. The less focus on self, the richer the experience. So transformation takes place when duality dissolves. So you know, in the consultation, in any interpersonal relationship, you want to get into the interpersonal space that's where everything gets resolved. So, so one of the ways to do this is through the senses, and this this presentation of the sensory systems are visible in the horoscope is like my own. So I haven't seen it anywhere, but it's really effective. And let me explain it a little bit. So in Buddhism, basically in Buddhism, they have, they actually have this division of 4 elements. But it's not like fire is flames and air is the wind and earth is earth and water is like what comes out of the tap. These are states of experience. They're the building blocks of experience. So in actual fact, water is like the liquid state, and earth is the solid state, and air is the gaseous state, and fire is the plasma state, radiation. So these are the 4 building blocks, and in the horoscope, you can actually find what the preferences for sensory preferences to represent reality, what they are. Now it's not like dead obvious, so like just because this planet's in Earth, it's not necessarily that's the totally Earth element that's going to dominate or anything. There are planets, that are going to orientate yourself to a particular element. Like Mars, it's going to be like orientating you to fire. Uranus is probably going to be orientating you to air. Saturn's going to be orientating you towards Earth, and Moon, Neptune, etc. It's going to be kind of more on the feeling state. And you can see from this drawing that basically it's also represented in the face and eye movements. And this is something from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, where they noticed that there's I don't know what they call it, visual, auditory, audio digital, which is like Earth, and emotional maybe, and it's true. If you can try it yourself, if you look up to the right, you actually start visualizing. It's very good for visualizing. Not everyone does it like this, but you look up to the right, you already can feel that you're visualizing. If you look up to the left is more like memory. So you're remembering a visual picture. And if you look just to the right, like where your ear is, you're actually accessing sounds from the past, your voices of your mother, etc. And if you look some horizontally to the left is the past, and right would be like imagining a sound. If you look down to the left, it's very, very Virgo. You're kind of, there's an archive down there. So when you're trying to remember something, you might be looking down to the left. And if you look down to the right, which is really powerful, you look down to the right, you're almost immediately getting contact with feelings. And you can use this actually in the consultation. Watching eye movements and directing eye movements also, so if you wanted somebody to feel something, it's so powerful. You can use the language related to water signs. Well, maybe I should expand on this. Let's say somebody's got a Moon-Pluto conjunction in Scorpio. Don't get deeper than that, right? Now, it's no use sort of saying, well, can you see any kind of situation where, and you're looking up, pointing up, where this, you might have had some very strong feelings about something, that's not going to work. But if you kind of look down slow, because water's slow, you look down, you sort of say, well, there must have been some situations where you felt completely cut off, I suppose. Do you feel it? The sort of more, water's like doesn't use many words. Air wants words, but water doesn't. So you have to tune into the feelings. If you're dealing with anything in the horoscope with water signs, it's emotional. And if you're going to be into this interpersonal space, you're going to feel the feelings too. But it's powerful to do this and transformative for the client. And you get to the point really quickly, you know, like within a couple of minutes, you're right to the key core issues for the person. So, so when you when you get beyond the actual circumstance, like, okay, Fred at work is very cold, and you know, you've got this Venus-Saturn square, Venus in the 6th, Fred at work is very cold, you know, and it makes me feel unwanted. You know, that's the circumstance. But what the key word is, makes me feel unwanted. That's the energy in the Venus-Saturn. So now the great thing about when they're in the energy of it, you know, because you could say then, so you feel this feeling somewhere in the body, you want to get grounded in the body, you know, so they will feel that feeling in the body, you know, and often with Venus, it's like a bit in the throat, you know, so it's a tightness, a constriction in the throat. Then they say, oh, I feel, you know, maybe you don't want to lead them there. You don't want to say, do you feel restriction in the throat? You're going to say, you know, where in the body do you feel that? Yeah, I feel it, yeah. And then when you feel that feeling, you know, what comes to mind. And the thing about the feeling is it was always there. It's always been there. And it was there when they were born. It was there when their mother was brought up, etc. You know, so it's like a direct channel of energy down to the core experience. And the core experience is probably in another life, but in this life there will be significant events, you know, in childhood, which are kind of core events, which made, especially with Saturn, it makes some kind of decision about numbing yourself or armoring yourself, you know, to protect yourself from, and that has consequences later on, because then you haven't been. Unfortunately, it's not Fred at work that has the problem. It's you that's been defensive and over-sensitive about the you know, when he made overtures to you, you acted cool, and you know, you pretended you're pretending something you're not. You are vulnerable, and you're pretending to be invulnerable. You know, so you actually evoke the situation with Fred. This gives people a control over what you know, what happens in their workplace. So let's have a look at kind of a way to do this. Now this person, I remember she came in the group session, so it was like a teaching class, and I had a school for astrologers in Copenhagen, and you know, it's really great. And we had these kind of situations where we'd invite clients, and this person had, as you can see, has a Sun-Pluto conjunction, right? And she came all in black. It's typical. And when people are all dressed in black, they're at the end of their resources. You know, they're on the pumps. You know, they haven't. They cannot give any energy. You know, they're absorbing. You know, it's normally a sign of great difficulty in their lives. Anyway, she was totally in black, everything. And she was obviously in a slightly difficult situation. But the core of the Sun-Pluto was that her father died when she was 12. And so, you know, it's typical, I think, the Sun-Pluto, that you lose, somehow you don't have the contact with the father, or you lose the contact with the father. But when I'm working with clients, you can't jump into a traumatic event. People don't have the resources to handle. So what I do is that I want to work on a really positive thing, and everybody's got it. Everybody's got something great that helps them with what's difficult. It's like what Bill Clinton said: "There's nothing wrong with America. What's right with America won't cure." You know, so you want to get people in sensory contact with the resources. You know, you get this in psychology as well. You know, when you're working with things like somatic experience therapy and all that, they'll then sort of make a pendulum between what's bad and what's good, you know, what resources and what's traumatic. So you know, this is an example of how to access positive resources, and it's more difficult than anything else. It's easy, and we astrologers, we gravitate very quickly to the difficult aspects because people really relate to them, but it doesn't make them feel good, you know. And we often, and they'll often say, well, okay, that's true, I feel like that. What should I do about it? And actually, you can do something about it, but it's good that you build up the resources first. So in this case, I identify it as a resource, and let's be clear about this. Good aspects are always resources. Then there's nothing negative. Well, you know, there's nothing negative about good aspects, but you could sort of get Mars, Venus conjunction in Scorpio, trine Neptune, and they love watching pornographic movies. I mean, but they like it, you know. So so basically, you know, from the client's point of view, good aspects are really great, but the best good aspects are the ones where the planets are strong. You know? So if you've got Venus, well, let's get something like, Venus in Scorpio, sextile something in Jupiter in Capricorn. That would be harmonious. They're both in 4 theoretically, you know, so that it's not a resource I'd aim for. There will be a resource, but it's like weak. So it's nice to get a strong resource, you know, like Venus in Taurus, sextile Jupiter in Pisces. That would be wonderful. And I remember having a client with Venus in Taurus, and she played the cello. Venus in Taurus, sextile Jupiter in Cancer, in a big orchestra. That was the Jupiter. Venus is the cello. She said it's just so joyful playing the cello, you know, and that's a resource. So you're looking for a resource, and you want to pick in the horoscope, you want to pick the easiest resource, you know, the strongest. And in this one, I chose this. It wasn't much to choose from, but you know, Mercury and Jupiter, they love each other, you know. So, and Jupiter's in Sag, that's nice, and Mercury's in Leo, that's not bad, is it? So they're in trine, and Mercury's kind of close to Uranus, you know. And so when you're trying to find a resource, you want to, you've got to find the concrete things. What doesn't work, just say, oh yeah, Mercury in Leo, trine Jupiter, you're very creative, and you know, you probably, you know, enjoyed at school and like being, you know, I don't know what you'd say, you know, some kind of, you're just telling them. That doesn't work. What you have to do is to evoke the feelings connected with it and identify the exact, any exact event connected with it. And it turned out in this case that what happened when she went to bed every night, her father used to read an adventure story. So that's Jupiter in Sagittarius in 3rd, trine Mercury, Uranus, exciting, because he'd always stop the story before the exciting bit came. So she was dying to go to bed to get that, and she was dying, you know, for the next day when we continued with the story. And she could remember this, made her feel very happy. You know, so she's happy now. She's really happy, you know, because she remembers something about her father, which is great. And she'd kind of forgotten, you know, and people do with resources. They dismiss them. You know, they think that everybody has this, but it's so unique. Each resource, each aspect, a positive aspect, so unique for the person. So it's a blessing. It's a huge blessing. Anyway, you know, once you've got the resource, you can work on the trauma, which is in this case the Sun Pluto, and there's ways to do that. But it's great that you've built up some positive energy, you know, so they've got something good to think about when they go home. This is another example of a client, and this like would be
Well, it started 15:15. Sorry, how much time have I got? Anybody? Okay.
80
20,
minutes.
20 minutes, I think.
Right. Anyway, let me explain this. Let me explain this diagram. So the idea when you're working with both resources, but difficult aspects. Now, maybe I should say something about difficult aspects. Difficult aspects are always difficult. You know, so there's kind of a fashion in astrology. We say, oh, it's good to have a square because you know it makes you, I don't know, dynamic or something like that. But it'll always show a problem, and that problem is an energy vortex which you have trouble dealing with all the time. You may, like with John McEnroe, who had this T-square with Mercury and Mars, and Pluto and Jupiter. You may be a fantastic tennis player, so in that sense, it's a resource, but mentally, it's a huge problem. So there will always be, a difficulty with a bad aspect. But you don't want to sell it like that. So, in this case, the resource could be, for example, Sun Jupiter conjunction in Pisces, with Jupiter in Pisces in the 9th. Now, that's really nice, isn't it? So we can deal with that. The difficulty would be, definitely this Mercury, it's weak in Pisces in the 8th house, and the opposite Uranus, it's kind of traumatized. Mercury in the 8th opposite Uranus and Pluto is traumatized. And that's a sort of shock, a mental shock to the system somewhere, so you don't want to go straight into that. It's secret as well because Mercury, Pluto, and Mercury's in the 8th, so so you want to approach it gently. Anyway, the story was basically this, a very interesting story. That is that she was unmarried and no really great relationships. Saturn conjoining the descendant, and the Saturn conjoining the descendant was kind of related to her parents' marriage, which was seen as unhappy. And why was it unhappy? It was unhappy because her father, which might be the son, conjunction Jupiter, he used to go to Tenerife. That's the island, Jupiter in Pisces, right, in the 9th. The father used to go to Tenerife with his mistress, but also with his daughter, with the client. So the client, the daughter, was accompanying the father while he was screwing the secretary on this tropical island, on this island. And he said to her, "You mustn't tell your mother." So that's the Mercury. See, Mercury opposite Pluto. You have to keep this secret. And later on, she used this against him. Like by saying, "Well, I love this. I like this dress, Daddy. Are you going to buy me the dress?" And of course, there's a sort of element of blackmail in it, which was this kind of Mercury and Mercury Pluto gives that blackmail. But the trouble was, that she came to me 3 times, and the first time, and each time actually it was the Sun Jupiter conjunction in the 9th. But anyway, the thing was, she was having an affair with a married man in Sweden. This was from Denmark, so she was having an affair with a married man abroad, just like Daddy, and she was wondering if he'd leave her, his wife, and the next time there was another married guy. So to deal with these issues, you need to kind of move from the present to the past. You have to find out what the core thing is in the past. And if you, for example, you want to deal with the Mercury, Pluto, Uranus, the thing is, it sounds not pretty fucked up actually, but the father asking her to be quiet about the affair, clearly, you can see in the horoscope, clearly messed up with her brain. And you want to, there's an energy connected with that, and the energy is like, she has to be, today, she has to be really secretive about meeting the guy, you know, her lover in Sweden. She has to be really secretive. And the idea is to connect this with the past, you know, as we got to the past with the, you know, how her father asked her to be secretive. But then there has to be the feeling of what it means to be in the secretive state. And the secretive state is not good. You know, it's like she's really anxious. You know, she goes back home and she has to sort of, the mother says, how was the holiday? What did you do? You know, and she sort of has to lie, and she, you know, and it creates great distress in the mental system. And that distress is really, really troublesome for her psychologically. And that's a feeling. Now, when you get a feeling that's connected with Uranus, it's often a kind of nervousness in the body, a kind of, often it's like on the skin, or you know, just the aura almost, you know, that's affected. So it's a nervous tension. And when it's connected with Pluto, it's a kind of deep anxiety, and the Pluto feeling, it's sort of deep inside the body. One way of dealing with that energy is to get people to feel the energy in the body and to move it down into the Hara chakra, or the kind of lower part of the body. Because it's like the more you have trauma down in the sexual chakra, or the Hara chakra, the less trauma there is. The more it's up here in your heart and throat, the more anxiety there is. You know, so you can actually get people to move energy if you've kind of got that trust and stuff like that. Okay, that was a little story about this person. So I just thought developing the element idea, the representation of all of reality through these four states of liquid, solid, gaseous, and plasma, or in Buddhism, there are also kind of four elemental states, which are really like they are Buddhas for each of them, you know, like to kind of reflect the energy. And in Buddhism, if you want my Buddhist view, there is this kind of idea that when you die, you know, the elements dissolve. So what happens is that initially the physical sense, you know, the sense of feeling in the body, as you're dying, it starts disintegrating. And there's certain sensations that you actually get, which they describe very detailed, because Buddhism is really into, you know, like navigating death. So you know, you lose the capacity to move your body, and the strength disappears from your body. And then the emotions kind of dissolve, you know, so you don't feel the pleasure, pain, indifference, you know, they kind of fade, and you sort of you lose that the water kind of element, and then the warmth disappears from your body. That's like the fire element, and apparently that affects memory and smell, so you kind of forget, and you can't smell anything. And then finally the breath leaves the body, corresponding to the air element, and then there's a complete loss of awareness of the outer world. And that's when things get interesting, because at that point you don't have the sensory faculties which are modulated by the brain, by the mind. You know, for example, when we hear sounds, you know, and they're all like nice enough, you know, that's terrible if you get some kind of I don't know, heavy rock coming in, you know, on the bus or something. But you know, generally the sound is kept at a nice level, you know, and we see colors, and they're generally kind of pleasant to look at and all that, you know, and smells and tastes, you know, they're also kind of comfortable. That's the brain. The brain's done all that. The brain has taken all that sensory input and made it reasonably pleasant to handle. Now, when all these sensory faculties dissolve, you know, all hell gets loose, right? You know, because your sense of time disappears, time, and your sense of physicality disappears. So you're actually in a state, a bit like a dream, where all your yeah, anything can happen, you know, and everything that you've been focusing on in your life, you know, is good, like the good things. That's why they talk about the good and bad and weighing it up, because you know, whatever your mind has been focused on starts without the intercession of the planets, the senses, and all that. It starts creating a reality, and in Tibetan Buddhism, it's called this bardo, the death bardo. It's like a whole new reality experience. They have three bardos: it's life bardo, dream, and then death. You know, and they're all kind of areas of existence. You know, so the more your mind is focused on anxiety creating things, that then the more your mind conjures up, you know, really vivid, uncontrolled images. The more you concentrated on love and all that, you know, the more pleasant experiences you're going to get. But they're all still illusions. And you know, after you've been wandering in this purgatory, which is also like a Christian concept and Muslim concept, you know, you know, you finally gravitate towards a family or a couple making love, who you associate, you feel a kind of connection with, and then you bang incarnate with their orgasm and you know, and so, you know, life, that's the kind of circle according to Buddhism of life. And I think the important thing is that it's a kind of a nice concept, I think, because when we look at the horoscope, we see a fully formed potential in the horoscope. You know, they're born, and you know, it's a great mystery in science and in psychology. Is it genetics? Is it nurture? What makes people develop their character? And you know, like even Donald Hoffman can't figure this out. You know, he sort of says he still thinks, or he's still investigating, but he's kind of moving away from it, investigating this idea that that the neurons, there's something happening with all the neurons in the brain, which you know, which create this sense of identity. But in Buddhism, that is not what is. It's not happening at all. There is no identity. There is no sense of self. The sense of self, the sense of, you know, it just becomes something that we've developed from, you know, from we're born and we're with mummy and and they say hello, and we just develop a sense of identity, which you know, informs perception. So when we perceive anything, we think, you know, I'm perceiving this. But at death, that sense of self dissolves. Then you could sort of ask yourself, well, okay, well, what, you know, what about reincarnation, and what about, you know, my previous lives? And because, you know, if you're an astrologer, it's not every astrologer, but, you know, a lot of them kind of believe in reincarnation and stuff like that. You know, if there's no real world out there, well, no, there is a world out there, but if, you know, how can our characters continue? And the reason that the characters continue is because we make impressions. And in Buddhism, it's called bagshags, actually. You know, it's like, so, you know, now Richard Dawkins would say impressions, you know, like on what's storing these impressions and all that. But basically, you know, the universe or the world out there is a really complicated place. There's 95% of the universe is dark matter. In other words, nobody can measure it. It doesn't interact with light. There's no instrument that can measure it. 95%. It's dark energy, dark matter. you know, so we don't really know how behavior, how we've impacted, you know, the cosmos. But in the reincarnation process, because we have impacted things, then there's a kind of action and reaction situation where we have to, you know, confront the consequences of our actions, which is karma. And that karma is what, you know, is the kind of circumstance we incarnate in, the parents we incarnate with, the environment we come in. That's what we evoke in, you know, in our incarnation, which is represented by the horoscope. So the horoscope is this, it's the blueprint, the map, the navigation instrument for us, you know, in the next life. And that's like, that's my view. It's a little bit personal maybe, but, you know, it's pretty much corresponds to the Buddhist idea. Yeah, and you know, it's like it hangs together rather well. If you think about like, how do psychologists explain character? They don't. Well, it's because they've been reincarnated and they, you know, they're carrying over the karma from previous lives. They don't say that because they get thrown out of the university, or, you know, or they wouldn't get their authorization or something like that. You know, I mean, a lot of psychologists are kind of into astrology, or the possibility of astrology, but it's not an accepted view. So they're stuck, and they're stuck because they don't really know, you know, how people's character develop. And they sort of say it's genetic and it's nurture and the environment, you know, but they still can't really explain the core character that's there when you're born. And that's what astrology can do. So, you know, that's why I say astrology is not an accurate representation of reality, but it is the best available tool for mapping a person's experience and their trajectory through life. And that's what I've got to say. And if anyone's got any questions, I'm really open to that.
Anyone in for questions? Take your chance.
Anybody, are you speaking? I can't hear.
I think there are no questions left.
Sorry, let me just see. I can't hear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, I can
Okay,
hear.
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Miriam raised her hand.
Yeah.
Miriam?
Oh, I see. That's that hand on the screen there. That's rather clever. Yeah.
Two hands.
Actually. Yeah, I'm just curious, actually. In that slide where you showed the example about Krishna asking, or Arjuna asking Krishna to show himself, and also the gospel where Jesus talks about the Father. Do you have any idea why it's always the Father, like a male?
Yeah, I was looking at that. I thought it was true, like, of the Bible. You know, I'm not sure if it's true of Krishna as such. You know, might be, I suppose. Yeah, I mean,
as the
obviously,
creator.
there's no gender in this. There's none of it.
Right.
It's completely beyond gender. You know, it's just a convention, I think.
Mm-hmm. Although,
do you have any idea of them?
Well, I wonder because birth comes from the mother. Okay, yes, not alone, but if you think about, you know, creation, how creation comes through into this world, it's okay, it's not one person, but it has come through a vehicle, which is the female.
Yeah, we're all born from mothers, right?
And we say Mother Earth, you know, which is our mother who takes care of us, who's very so very Cancerian kind of concept. And but in all these religious books, they talk about a he always.
Yeah, and I think also in Tibetan Buddhism, I mean, they're often male, they're almost all male gurus, you know, with the lineage coming down through the male line. I think they're slightly embarrassed about that today. You know, maybe it's just been a patriarchal era, you know, the last couple of thousand years.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. It's off subject, but I just keep wondering about that.
Yeah. So, you know, in terms of reality, or like interpreting reality, one has to examine one's own thoughts, you know, and where they come from, and you know, are they obscuring or revealing? And it's all beyond gender in the end.
Thank you.
Hey, Wanda.
Oh, there's many hands. I can see
Yeah.
hands now. Yeah, that's great.
Wanda.
Adrian, thank you very much for this very interesting reading.
Thank you.
I mean, it's a very philosophical, existentialistic kind of subject where you are talking about. So I was wondering if you, you know, if the world in a way only exists through your own perception, through your senses. Could it be that everything that a person perceives, that it is totally made up by the person?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And the answer is no. So there is a reality out there, definitely. It's just not the one we represent through our senses. It's not, you know, it's not. We don't need to know exactly what it is actually, but you know, like a bear would you know, create another version of that reality where the smell would be extremely important, and you know, that's the way they navigate. There is a world out there, according to Buddhism and according to Donald Hoffman. So it's not just a solipsistic kind of idea. It's not just in the mind.
But how do you know? How do you know then? Because
I can't actually. To be honest, that's a good question, but I can't remember the argumentation. All I know is for sure that in all of Buddhism, they reject that. But it's a known objection, you know, like a nihilistic kind of view, which they call, you know, and they have arguments to counter it. And there is probably also in the science, there is some kind of counter argument. And I actually don't really know it. So thanks for that. Maybe I'm going to have to research a bit more to counter that argument. But you know, the answer is no. There is a world out there.
Okay, thank you.
Danielle.
The sample chart, the last one with that woman with all the squares, with her father.
Yeah.
You said bad aspects are bad aspects, and well, that's what it is. But then that's her perception. Obviously, she came into this life with that perception. That's her reality. So what do you do as an astrologer when such a person comes to you? Because obviously you can't say, well, this is what it is. Your life is basically fucked. You will never have a man.
Right.
You can't. So what do you? How do you?
Okay. That's a good question.
Deal with that. I wonder.
Well, I mean, I'm going to take the positive view, right? This is the challenge that they have, you know, like, so first of all, they're having these experiences connected with the bad aspects, and it's not making them feel good, it's making them feel bad. So you can identify that feeling, and they can, you know. So when they have identified that feeling, they often will say, oh, that's so true. what can I do about it?
Yeah.
Right. And that is the key moment in any dealing with any aspect in the consultation. And I actually, when I first many years of practice, when they said that, I thought, I don't know really, I don't know what to do about it. But I think there's some stages which you can go through which help them deal with it. Now, the first stage of that is like, yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, your mother was cruel to you, and she what can I say, sent you to your bedroom and didn't relate, so that gave you some moon Uranus kind of trauma. That's the fact. They know that, that, and they have certain feelings connected with that. So the first thing is like, and it's had this kind of this effect, which would be like you dissociate, so you start dissociating. It's your way of dealing with it with moon Uranus. So they recognize that they're doing this, and then they say, okay, what can I do about that? Now, there's an energy in it, and the energy of moon Uranus is like incredibly, well, they're going to feel it somewhere in their body, often they'll dissociate from the body, so you can ground them in the body. But first they just have to accept, self-acceptance, that okay, that's what they're dealing with. That's one of their challenges. If they want the relationships to improve, they're going to need to bridge that dissociation gap. So we've identified the problem, the challenge, and so now we can start working on ways to deal with it. The first thing is like, yeah. So you accept it, and if it's this, and you're talking with your partner, you can say, look, when he says, why are you so distant? Well, you just feel as if you're not there. Then you sort of you say, yeah, you're right. I got this. This is something I'm dealing with because of this with my mom. And I'm working on it. And it sort of, you can bring it out in the open. Every time this dissociation happens, which estranges you from the partner, you can sort of say, it's an opportunity. Now it becomes an opportunity, and you can sort of say to the partner, look, what I really want is for you to hold me at my hand like my mum never did, or something like that. And you can actually give them homework, and they have to recognize what they're working on. Another example could be like, let's suppose you got a Mercury-Pluto square, and you're suspicious. You're suspicious. Why are you suspicious? It's because your parents kept secrets from you, or somebody kept secrets from you. And there was a toxic area in your upbringing where nobody talked about anything, and so you believe that things are hidden, and so you get suspicious. You start developing a interrogation communication style. Why are you back? Why are you back half hour late? Where have you been? And the partner, what happens with Mercury Pluto people, their partner ends up just shutting up. They end up just not saying anything, which makes it all worse. So the Mercury Pluto person has to understand they've got this interrogatory style which developed because of this. It's not their fault. Anybody that's been in that situation when they were a child would have developed this. So this is what's harming relationships today. So this is what to do. And it's like to be aware that you could sort of say to your partner, "Oh, am I interrogating you again? Sorry, I'm working on it." So it comes in the open.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No. Well, Adrian, thank you very much for your tribute to the symposium of 2020.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for explaining your thoughts on awareness and this world. So
right, and if anybody needs the PDF, they can write via my website, which you can see here at the bottom, and I'll just send them the PDF of this presentation.
Okay, and we have recorded it, so the recording is available. If you like to have one, you will be.
I would, yeah, very much.
Yeah, you get the link this week, probably
Great,
tomorrow.
great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. It's been fun.
Thank you,
Yeah.
I hope you've enjoyed. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and in addition to Dick, I will send a link to everybody at Tuesday.
Okay.
Yes. So yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then
Thank you.
see it till 15 March. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.